Let's talk about how to spend on ads to support a launch. And when I refer to a launch here, I'm specifically referring to a short-term launch, like a Jeff Walker style launch where your product may only be available for a few days and then you turn it off and it's not available anymore. That's a different kind of animal when it comes to advertising, because very frankly, the traditional way of advertising to support a launch, to support a product launch that doesn't happen that way, really doesn't work very well with this. So most people spend all their money on the launch itself, but there is a better way. So now I'm going to give you a caveat here. If you're spending $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 to support your launch, then you can ignore what I'm going to say. Don't, because a lot of what I'm going to say really applies to you. But if you're spending less than $10,000, this is really important for you to understand. So there is a key fact, which is that Facebook takes several days for their algorithm to really work. So when you first start advertising, that first day or so, Facebook's algorithm works really well because it sends you just the sweetest people, the ones most targeted to what you do. After that, it then has to figure out, all right, who else should I show this to? And it has to slam a bunch of people up against your ad to see how many of those fulfill the goal, the objective you have on that particular ad. So if it's conversion, it's got to run a bunch of people through, gets a bunch of conversions and figure out, okay, what are the things in common between these people who bought or did whatever that conversion thing was versus these who didn't, so it can send more. And it just takes about a week to do that, 5 days a week, something like that. The problem is, but by the time that your ad is seasoned, so the algorithm's been trained, you're turning off that ad because, hey, it only runs for a few days and then your launch is done. And so I strongly suggest that there is a way that basically what you're doing when you do that is that you are maximizing your spending very frankly, while minimizing your success. This isn't the best way to advertise for a launch. So unless you have a lot more than $10,000 to spend, I'm going to give you a model here that I think is a much more cost-effective way to spend on advertising for launch. Very simple. It's this. Spend 90% of your budget before the launch. 90% of your budget, spend it before the launch, usually at least 15 to 30 days before. Why? Because what we're trying to do is that we're trying to build our list before you launch and then nurture that list so that they love you, they want to do what you're asking them to do, and you've already made them no longer, okay. What you're trying to do is you're trying to warm them up so they're no longer a cold audience. How many days does it take to do that? I don't know the answer to that. It all depends on your particular thing. But you're spending 90% of your budget. So if you got $10,000, you're going to spend $9,000. If you're spending $5,000, you're going to spend $4,500 of that well before the launch. Then you're out of the market on your main ad spending, and you're only spending 10% on retargeting your list during the launch itself. This is really key. So what that does is it enables your ad to become seasoned, to start performing its best. You minimize your spending while maximizing your result and generate a list that you then warm up so that you can then sell them through retargeting and through your ad itself and through email, the power of sending emails to them. That's how you actually do the launch itself. Now, if you've got more than 10,000, what I would suggest you do is that you spend about 60% of that budget on that list build phase, the one I just told you about. And by the way, that list build phase does not have to happen just 15 to 30 days before your launch. It can happen months before your launch. Potentially, the longer you get them in there, the more chance you've had to help them to be warmed up in that process. Then, so 60% on list build, 10% on retargeting during the launch itself, and then take the remainder to actually support the launch in the traditional way. There's some specific strategies to do that. If you're one of those people who has those big budgets, contact me. We can talk about that. Okay. All right. Now, I suggest that if you do that, so if you got more than that 10,000 and you're spending that money to support your launch, that you take at least nice sized chunk of that and spend it on Google, and specifically target your personal name, your product name, things like scam, rip-off, those kinds of things. So search for Don Crowther scam, Don Crowther this, rip-off, those kinds of things. Don Crowther review, your product name review, your product name scam, your product name, those kinds of things. Why? Because when people are coming, they're hearing about your product, they're then going to go Google you. They're going to go check you out. And what you want to have is you want those first results to be you, as opposed to maybe a competitor talking negatively about you and trying to sell their product, or an affiliate talking about you so they can get an affiliate commission. This is especially important if you are using affiliates. So one of the things that we've learned over time is that when you're in a product launch mode, especially in open cart mode, you definitely want to be running Google AdWords on your product name and your personal name, so that people are coming to you to learn about you, as opposed to going to the rest of the world who may have alternate intentions as they talk about you. So there's your model. If you're spending less than $10,000, spend 90% of it on list build well before your launch, 10% on retargeting during the launch. If you're over 10,000, spend 60% of it on list build well before your launch, 10% of it on retargeting during the launch, and whatever the remainder is, support the launch. And I suggest a big chunk of that goes into Google Ads so that you are supporting the people where they are as they're coming to check you out. Okay, there you go. Some ratios. I hope you find those to be powerful, acceptable, and that you'll understand what we're trying to do. We're trying to use the algorithm the best way and not just pour a bunch of money into Facebook's pockets. Trust me, they've got enough to retire on right now. They don't need extra money from you. This is Don Crowther saying, just go do this stuff.